I thought we were building a life together. I had no idea that while I was packing his mother's belongings out of my house, she was toasting her victory at the city's most expensive restaurant, using my credit card to run up a bill that would hit $3,000 before the appetizers were even cleared. The text came through at 7:28 p.m. Just 2 words from an unknown number. "Thank you, darling," with a photo attached, champagne flutes raised, my mother-in-law's face flushed with triumph, surrounded by women I'd never seen before. In the background, I could make out the distinctive marble columns of Bellissimo, where reservations required 6 weeks' notice and entrees started at $80. My hands went cold around my phone. I wasn't darling, I wasn't invited, and I certainly hadn't authorized this. Mark's call came exactly 2 minutes later. "I'll write this dramatic story following your detailed master prompt requirements. This is a creative writing task that will follow your 8-part structure with the critical 30,000 to 35,000 character requirement. I thought we were building a life together. I had no idea that while I was packing his mother's belongings out of my house, she was toasting her victory at the city's most expensive restaurant, using my credit card to run up a bill that would hit $3,000 before the appetizers were even cleared. The text came through at 7:28 p.m. Just 2 words from an unknown number. "Thank you, darling," with a photo attached, champagne flutes raised, my mother-in-law's face flushed with triumph, surrounded by women I'd never seen before. In the background, I could make out the distinctive marble columns of Bellissimo, where reservations required 6 weeks' notice and entrees started at $80. My hands went cold around my phone. I wasn't darling, I wasn't invited, and I certainly hadn't authorized this. Mark's call came exactly 2 minutes later. The house that should have been ours. 3 months earlier, everything had seemed perfect in that fragile glass house way that perfect things always do before they shatter. Mark and I had just closed on our first home together, a renovated craftsman with original hardwood floors and a kitchen that still smelled like fresh paint and possibility. We'd spent our first weekend there painting the bedroom a soft grey that changed colour with the light, laughing as we got more paint on each other than on the walls. "Mum's really excited to see it," Mark had said that Sunday evening, standing in our new kitchen with a beer in one hand and his phone in the other. His mother, Patricia, had been calling 3 times a day since we'd signed the papers. Visit. That single word should have been my first warning, but I was too drunk on new house optimism to hear the threat embedded in its syllables. Patricia arrived the following Tuesday with 7 suitcases. Quote, 4, she'd said, breezing past me into our foyer, trailing Chanel No. 5 and entitlement. "My condo is being renovated. Something about water damage. The whole place is uninhabitable. Mark said it would be fine." Mark, standing behind her with a look of trapped desperation I was only beginning to recognize, had indeed said it would be fine. He'd said it would be fine without consulting me, without even mentioning it. I'd come home from work to find his mother directing the placement of her Louis Vuitton luggage in our guest room, already rearranging the furniture to accommodate her needs. "It's just a few weeks," Mark repeated that night after Patricia had finally retired to her room. "She's my mother. What was I supposed to say?" "No," I'd suggested quietly. Quote, 10, but Mark's face had closed like a door, and I'd let it drop. After all, it was just a few weeks. How bad could it be? The answer, as it turned out, was catastrophic. Patricia's few weeks had stretched to 2 months. 2 months of her criticizing my cooking, rearranging my kitchen, leaving passive-aggressive notes about how I loaded the dishwasher wrong. 2 months of her spending hours on the phone with Mark while I sat alone in my own living room, feeling like an intruder. 2 months of watching my husband transform from the man I'd married into a nervous, apologetic stranger who couldn't meet my eyes. But it was the financial snooping that finally broke through my patience. I'd come home early one Thursday. My boss had given me the afternoon off after I'd closed a major account, to find Patricia in my home office, my laptop open on the desk in front of her, my bank statement spread across the workspace like evidence at a crime scene. Patricia, my voice came out harder than I'd intended, sharp enough to make her jump. Quote, 13. She'd looked up with that smile I was learning to hate, the one that never reached her eyes, that curved her mouth into something between sympathy and superiority. Oh, sweetie, I was just trying to help. Mark mentioned you'd been stressed about finances, and I thought, Mark is wrong. I'd crossed the room in 3 strides, slamming the laptop shut with more force than necessary. Quote, 16, quote, 17, she'd corrected gently, like she was explaining something to a slow child. This is Mark's house too, and I am his mother. We don't have secrets in this family. We don't have secrets in this family. The words had hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. This family, as if I were separate from it, as if I were the outsider in my own home. That night, I'd asked Mark to set boundaries with his mother, to tell her she needed to leave, to choose me. He'd sighed. He'd run his hands through his hair. He'd said, quote, 19, and then he'd gone to bed, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the sound of his mother's television filtering through the ceiling, her presence pressing down on me like a physical weight. I should have made him talk about it then. I should have demanded answers. But I was trying to be understanding, to be flexible, to be the kind of wife who didn't make ultimatums. I thought we had time. I was wrong. The unravelling. It started with small things going missing. A credit card from my wallet, one I rarely used, so it took me a week to notice. When I mentioned it to Mark, he'd shrugged and suggested I'd misplaced it. Patricia, overhearing from the living room, had offered sweetly that she'd quote, _20_. Then my grandmother's ring disappeared from my jewellery box. A simple gold band with 3 small diamonds, worth maybe $1,000 in monetary value, but priceless in memory. My grandmother had worn it every day of her married life, had pressed it into my palm the week before she died and whispered, "For your forever love, sweetheart." When I'd torn apart the house looking for it, Patricia had found me in the bedroom, crying, drawers pulled open and clothes scattered across the floor. Quote, 22. Her hand on my shoulder had felt like a spider, all delicate pressure and hidden threat. Quote, 23. My voice had cracked. Quote, 24. Quote, 25. Patricia's face had arranged itself into concern, but her eyes had been calculating, cold. You've been so stressed lately. Maybe you moved it and forgot? It happens. I'm sure it'll turn up. But it didn't turn up. And 3 days later, I'd seen that same ring on Patricia's finger. I'd stared at it across the dinner table, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. Unable to process what I was seeing, the 3 small diamonds catching the light, the slight wear on the band where my grandmother's knuckle had rubbed against it for 60 years, my ring, on my mother-in-law's hand. Patricia. My voice had sounded distant, coming from somewhere outside my body. That's my grandmother's ring. She'd glanced down at her hand as if surprised to find jewellery there. Quote, 29. Quote, 30. I'd set down my fork carefully, precisely, because my hands were starting to shake. That's my grandmother's ring. It has a small scratch on the inside band. My grandfather's wedding ring left it there. Let me see it. Patricia's hand had curled into a protective fist. I turned to my husband, sitting at the head of our table in our house, waiting for him to correct her, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to be on my side. Mark had looked at his plate. Mom's right. That's been in our family forever. The betrayal of it had stolen my breath. Not just his mother's theft, but his complicity in the lie. His willingness to gaslight me, to deny reality, to choose her over the evidence of my own eyes. That's when I'd known something was deeply, irrevocably wrong. I'd started watching them more carefully after that, noticing the hushed conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. The way Patricia's eyes would follow me, calculating, assessing, the way Mark had started working late, avoiding being alone with me, deflecting every attempt I made to talk about when his mother was leaving. And then I'd found the documents. It was a Saturday morning. Patricia had gone to brunch with friends. At least, that's what she'd said. Mark had been called into the office for an emergency. I'd been alone in the house for the first time in months, and I'd savoured it like oxygen after drowning. I hadn't meant to snoop. I was looking for our homeowner's insurance policy. We'd gotten a notice about renewal, and I wanted to review the coverage. The filing cabinet in Mark's den was where we kept all our important papers, and I'd expected to find it there. Instead, I'd found a manila folder labelled Quote 35. My hands had gone cold as I'd opened it. Inside were documents I didn't recognise. Legal forms, a power of attorney with my forged signature, granting Mark full control over all my assets. A quitclaim deed transferring my half of the house to Patricia. Documents showing my grandmother's ring listed as family heirloom, Patricia Chen, rightful owner. And beneath all of that, a handwritten note in Patricia's angular script. Quote, 37. The world had tilted sideways. I'd sat down hard in Mark's desk chair, the folder clutched in my numb fingers, trying to breathe through the nausea rising in my throat. This wasn't just boundary crossing. This wasn't just a difficult mother-in-law overstaying her welcome. This was theft, fraud, premeditated destruction of my life. And my husband had helped her do it. I'd photographed every document with shaking hands, uploaded them to a secure cloud account, and carefully returned everything to exactly where I'd found it. Then I'd sat in that office for 20 minutes staring at nothing while my entire world reorganised itself around this new, horrible truth. When Mark came home that afternoon, I'd been in the kitchen making dinner, acting normal. When Patricia returned from her brunch, I'd smiled and asked how it was. And that night, lying next to my husband in the dark, I'd started planning. If they wanted a war, they'd get one, but on my terms. The reckoning begins. It took me 3 days to line up my defences. 3 days of pretending everything was normal while I methodically protected everything I could. First, I'd consulted with an attorney, not our usual family lawyer, but someone Patricia didn't know. Someone who'd looked at the photographs I'd taken and gone very still, very serious. This is fraud, she'd said quietly. Quote, 39, we'd changed all my account passwords, frozen my credit, added alerts to every financial account I had. I'd opened a new bank account at a different institution and transferred 70% of my savings into it. I documented everything, the theft of the ring, the forged documents, Patricia's note, the credit card that had gone missing. Second, I'd hired a private investigator. Expensive, but worth every penny. Within 48 hours, he discovered that Patricia's condo renovation was fiction. Her building had no water damage, no ongoing construction. She'd been evicted 3 months ago for non-payment of rent and had been living in extended stay hotels, burning through credit cards and her son's money. He'd also discovered that this wasn't her first con. She'd pulled similar schemes with 2 previous daughters-in-law. Both marriages had ended in contentious divorces, where Patricia had somehow walked away with property and assets, while her sons had been left financially devastated and emotionally destroyed. Mark was her third victim, and I was supposed to be the collateral damage. Third, I'd installed security cameras, small ones hidden in bookshelves and picture frames, legal in my own home, and capable of recording both video and audio. If they were going to plot my destruction, I was going to have evidence. By Monday evening, I was ready. And that's when fate handed me the perfect opportunity. Mark had come home from work and announced, tension tight around his eyes, that he had a business trip. 3 days in Chicago, leaving tomorrow morning. Quote, 41, he'd said, not quite meeting my gaze. So you won't be alone. I'd smiled and kissed his cheek and told him to have a safe flight. And I'd watched him pack that night, watched him avoid looking at the life we'd built together, watched him choose his mother's manipulation over our marriage. After he'd left Tuesday morning, Patricia had emerged from her room with a new energy, almost giddy. Quote, 43, she'd said over coffee. We should do something fun. Go out to dinner, maybe. That sounds lovely, I'd agreed, butter smooth. And I'd meant it, because I knew exactly what she was planning. That afternoon, while Patricia was in the shower, I'd checked her room, found her phone lying on the dresser, unlocked and open to a group chat labelled, quote, 46. The messages made my blood run cold and my resolve turned to steel. Patricia had responded. I'd photographed it all. And then, I'd made my own plans, the trap springs. Patricia left the house at 6:30 p.m, dressed to the nines in designer clothes I was fairly certain she'd charged to my credit cards. She told me she was meeting, quote, 53 and would be home by 9. I'd wished her a lovely evening and watched her drive away in the Lexus Mark had bought her last year. Another detail I'd only recently learned. Another expense he'd hidden from me. At 6:45, I'd checked the security footage. Empty house. Perfect. I'd made myself a cup of tea, settled on the couch with my laptop, and logged into our joint credit card account. The one Patricia had somehow gained access to. The one she thought she could use with impunity because Mark had given her permission. The charges had already started appearing. Bellissimo, a round of cocktails, $247, another round, $198, an appetizer course for the table, $340. I'd watched the numbers climb, each charge a fresh insult, and I'd waited. At 7:15, the entrees started hitting. Wagyu beef, Chilean sea bass, lobster. The table of 12 women I'd never met were feasting on my dime, celebrating my destruction, and they had no idea the floor was about to fall out from under them. At 7:28, right after a $430 charge for wine cleared, I'd received that text. Thank you, darling. With the photo of Patricia and her friends, champagne glasses raised, faces flushed with victory and alcohol. I'd stared at that photo for a long moment. At my mother-in-law's triumphant smile. At the women laughing around her, complicit in her celebration of my ruin. At the sheer audacity of it all. Then I'd called the credit card company. Quote, 55, I'd said, my voice calm and clear. Someone has stolen my card information and is currently using it without authorization. The representative had been efficient, sympathetic. I'm showing several large charges at Bellissimo restaurant this evening. Is that correct? That's correct. I'm at home. Those charges are fraud. I'm freezing the account now, ma'am. Those charges will be declined. And we'll begin the investigation process. Perfect. Thank you. I'd hung up and checked my watch. 7:29 p.m. I'd given them just enough rope to hang themselves with, let them order the expensive wine and the premium dessert course, let them feel safe and victorious. And now I was cutting the line. At 7:30, Mark's call came through. I let it ring 4 times before answering, taking a sip of my tea, letting him sweat. Quote, 61, quote, 62. His voice was tight, panicked. Quote, 63, quote, 64, I interrupted, my voice pleasant, conversational. Quote, 65. Silence on the other end. I could hear restaurant noise in the background, the clatter of dishes, voices, Patricia's voice rising in what sounded like panic. You what? Mark finally said. I reported the fraud, I repeated, slowly, like I was explaining something simple to someone slow. Your mother stole my credit card information and is currently using it to throw a party celebrating how she's planning to steal my house. I have evidence, Mark. Photographs, documents, everything. So, yes, the card is frozen. And no, I won't be unfreezing it. Sarah, Please, she's at the restaurant with 12 people. The bill is almost $3,000. They won't let her leave without paying. Then I guess she'll have to figure something out. I took another sip of tea. Maybe she could wash dishes. I hear that's what they make you do when you can't pay your bill. This isn't funny, Mark's voice cracked. Quote, 7-3. And there it was, the real Mark. Not the man I'd married, but the man he'd been hiding all along. The one who thought I should just accept being stolen from. Who thought I was the problem for defending myself. Quote, 74. My voice went cold. All the steel I'd been hiding finally showing through. What's not funny is that your mother has been plotting to steal my home. What's not funny is finding forged documents with my signature. What's not funny is that my husband knew about it and did nothing. What's not funny is that while she's celebrating destroying my life, you're calling me from Chicago, where I know you're not actually on a business trip, demanding I make this easy for you. Another beat of silence. How did you? I called your office. There's no business trip. So, where are you really, Mark? Or should I ask who you're with? I heard him breathing on the other end, caught, trapped. And some small broken part of me had still hoped he'd deny it, still hoped there was an explanation. Quote, 78, he finally said. Quote, 79. I stood up, walking to the window, looking out at the neighbourhood we'd moved into together. The life I'd thought we were building. Quote, 80, quote, 81, quote, 82, quote, 83. I hung up. And then I blocked his number. The aftermath, Patricia called me 17 times that night. I blocked her too. According to the private investigator I had monitoring the situation, because yes, I was absolutely that thorough, Patricia had tried every card she had, all declined. She'd tried to call Mark. He hadn't answered, too busy dealing with his own crisis, probably, figuring out how to explain to whatever woman he was with that his wife had just blown up his life. Eventually, the restaurant manager had called the police. Patricia had spent 3 hours at Bellissimo, crying, claiming she'd been robbed, insisting there was a mistake. Her 11 friends had scattered like roaches when the lights came on, each scrambling to cover their own portions of the bill, with growing panic as they realised the promised free feast was anything but. In the end, Patricia had been forced to call her sister, someone she'd apparently been avoiding for years, who'd driven an hour to the restaurant, paid the bill with her own credit card, and then, according to my investigator, had spent the drive back to her house loudly informing Patricia exactly what she thought of her behaviour. Patricia didn't come home that night, or the next night. I changed the locks anyway, as promised, had her belongings packed by a service. I didn't want to touch them, and left them on the front porch with a note that simply said, "You have 48 hours to collect these before they're donated." Mark showed up on Thursday. I watched him from the window as he tried his key, found it didn't work, and then stood on our porch looking lost. He'd aged 5 years in 3 days. I didn't open the door. Instead, I texted him, quote, 85. His response came immediately, quote, 86. I looked at that message for a long moment, and then I deleted it without responding. What was there to explain? That he'd chosen his mother over me? That he'd participated in fraud? That he'd been planning to steal my home? That he'd been cheating on me while his mother celebrated my destruction? There were no words that could make any of that okay. No explanation that would erase the betrayal. No apology that would rebuild the trust he'd burned to the ground. I blocked him, too. The legal reckoning. The divorce took 6 months. Mark tried to fight for the house, of course. Patricia had convinced him he had a right to it, that I was being unreasonable, that if he just pushed hard enough, I'd give in. What they hadn't counted on was that I had documentation of everything. The forged documents, the theft. Patricia's written plan, the security camera footage of them discussing their scheme in my living room. bank records showing Mark had been funneling money to his mother for months, depleting our joint savings behind my back. My attorney had laid it all out in court with the precision of a surgeon, each piece of evidence a scalpel cut exposing the rot beneath. The judge had not been sympathetic. Mark walked away from our marriage with his clothes, his car, and a mountain of legal debt. I kept the house, my savings, my grandmother's ring, which Patricia was legally compelled to return, and my self-respect. Patricia faced criminal fraud charges. Mark was named as a co-conspirator. Both of them took plea deals to avoid jail time, 5 years probation, restitution, and permanent restraining orders preventing them from contacting me. I found out later, through mutual friends who were still speaking to me, that this had destroyed Mark's relationship with Patricia as well. When it became clear that her scheme had not only failed, but had cost him everything, he'd finally, belatedly, grown a spine. He'd cut her off, refused to help her, left her to face the consequences of her actions alone. Too little, too late. But there was a grim satisfaction in knowing that Patricia's grand plan had ended with her losing both her Mark and her accomplice. Epilogue. It's been 18 months since that night at Bellissimo. 18 months since I blocked the credit cards and watched their celebration crumble into ash and panic. I'm sitting on my back porch now, the same porch where Mark and I used to have coffee on Sunday mornings, planning our future. The house is truly mine now, legally, financially, spiritually. I've repainted the guest room, exorcising Patricia's presence with a cheerful sage green. I've replaced the furniture she rearranged. I've made this space entirely, completely my own. I won't lie and say it doesn't hurt. There are still nights when I wake up reaching for someone who isn't there, mornings when I forget for a moment that I'm alone. Divorce, even a necessary one, is a kind of death. The death of the future you thought you'd have. The death of the person you thought you loved. But there's a freedom in the grief, too. A lightness in knowing I don't have to wonder anymore, don't have to question my sanity when things go missing, don't have to walk on eggshells in my own home, don't have to watch my husband choose someone else over me, again and again and again. I'm dating again, slowly, learning to trust my instincts, the ones I ignored when Mark's mother moved in with 7 suitcases, the ones I overrode when I found Patricia in my office with my bank statements. The ones I silenced when my grandmother's ring appeared on her finger and my husband backed her lie. Those instincts are louder now, clearer. I listen to them, and sometimes, late at night, I think about Patricia at that restaurant, champagne glass raised, celebrating a victory she'd never achieve. I think about the panic in her voice when the card declined, the humiliation of being escorted to the manager's office, the long, silent drive to her sister's house, all her schemes turned to dust. I don't take pleasure in her suffering exactly, but I don't regret it either. She made her choices. I simply made sure she faced the consequences. My phone buzzes, a text from my friend Jen, asking if I want to grab dinner tomorrow. I type back a quick yes and set the phone down, smiling. The sun is setting behind the oak tree in my backyard, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. My coffee has gone cold, but the evening is warm, and I'm in no hurry to go inside. This is my house, my life, my peace, hard-won, fiercely protected, and entirely mine. And that celebration, the real one, is worth more than all the champagne at Bellissimo. I learned something important in the wreckage of my marriage, that being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. That forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, for your future, is to walk away from people who see you as nothing more than an obstacle or a resource. And I learned that when someone shows you who they are, you should believe them the first time, not the 10th after they've already stolen from you, not the 20th after they've already betrayed you, the first time. When your mother-in-law shows up with 7 suitcases for a _quote _88_. When your husband makes decisions about your shared life without consulting you. When you find someone in your office rifling through your private documents. Those were all first times. I just hadn't been ready to see them yet, but I see clearly now. And I'll never be that blind again. The porch light flickers on automatically as the sun finishes setting. I gather my cold coffee and head inside, locking the door behind me. My door, my lock, my choice. And I'm smiling. Enjoy your night, ladies. I certainly am.